Calligraphy didn't happen until college. I had a design professor who, for some reason, he showed me a piece of calligraphy he had done, and I was just floored by it. I had never seen anything quite like it. I asked him how he made that, and he just said pen, ink, and paper. So as far as simplicity and the cost of materials, which is always a concern to a college student, I said, wow, maybe I'll try some of it. And he didn't teach me anything. He just showed me his work and pointed me towards some materials. And I just took off from there. My mom had worked at the New York Public Library, and when she heard about interest in calligraphy, she was head of the cataloging department. So new books would come in and she would catalog them. And she saw a copy of Edward Johnston's Writing, Illuminating, and Lettering, and she brought it home for me. So you might say my lettering career started with a crime, because I still have the book. She said, but there was more than one copy, so she justified it. I had very little to go on, but that book helped, and I was inspired enough to keep going. So there was something in me that was attracted to letters, and I haven't stopped since. So it's been a while. Possibly. I think the key for me was that because I had some lettering skills, I was able to draw letters. So whenever I was asked in the ensuing years for a project, I didn't try to access type. I drew my own letters. And a lot of lettering artists did that, just made custom lettering for a headline or for whatever was necessary. That was a good skill to have at the time, because you could always really customize, the project to suit the client. For designers now, it's a mad choice to pick out the appropriate typeface. I mean, there are endless choices, and very few typographers really have hand lettering skills to customize stuff. I mean, you can do it digitally now, and I think that's mostly the way it's done, but I still think there's a special skill in being able to draw letters by hand. And I always encourage my students to approach type through hand skills initially, and we do a lot of drawing exercises to encourage that. Digital drawing is a skill, but it's a mechanical skill. And there's nothing like putting pencil to paper to really evoke a certain warmth and sense of the hand in letter skills. I think it's really important. And I think you'll hear most calligraphers talk about that. I moved from Binghamton, which is where I was going to school at the State University, to Syracuse before I went to Cambridge. So the 2.5 years I was in Syracuse, I didn't know what to do with my immature calligraphy skills. So I thought, well, how am I going to make some money? So there was a sign painting shop in my neighborhood, and I just said, is it all right if I just hang out and watch you guys work? And the proprietor said, sure, why don't you just help out too, so you're not in the way? So I said, great. So he had me prep sign boards, whether it was plywood or cardboard. And I watched him, he had some crazy skills with a brush. And I didn't know how to wield the brush at all. So it was fun just to watch him. But I liked it, and I learned a lot. So it was an interesting couple of years. And I was also doing calligraphy, some freelance. Maybe one job led to another, and I picked up a few commissions. It helped me learn. It helped solidify the fact that I could make a living doing this. So a couple of years of doing that, I was ready to leave Syracuse. It was cold, and there wasn't that much culturally going on. So I decided to take the next step and move to a little more vibrant community, which headed me toward Cambridge. I was a little bit overwhelmed by it, but looking forward to it. I was working in Syracuse part-time. Actually, I ended up working there full-time for an alternative newspaper, doing page layout and some design for them. So I did work with type. They had a photo typesetter in-house, so I was speccing type, and it seemed like a natural progression from my lettering skills and my graphic design study in college. I did that for a couple of years. It was the Syracuse New Times. So when I moved to Cambridge, I didn't expect to exist or make enough money doing freelance because nobody knew me there. So I tried to find a job for one of the alternative newspapers, and there were two in Cambridge at the time. One was called The Real Paper, and I think the other was called The Phoenix. And I interviewed at both places, and I didn't get a job for some reason. I didn't think they didn't think I had enough skills. But it was fortunate in a way because I started to just figure, all right, I'm just going to try to make a go at it freelancing. I printed up a whole bunch of flyers with some of my work and I mailed them to all the art directors in Boston. That was a huge task. At the same time, became aware of the fact that there was a lettering arts guild in Boston. Somehow I found out about it and I went to a meeting. I mean, these were my people. I was so excited to see that other people were doing really fantastic lettering works, both freelance as calligraphers and as letter cutters. And they were also organizing shows, calligraphy exhibits. So they welcomed me with open arms and we met once a month. It helped me learn to feel part of something larger than any single freelancer. It was just a seminal gathering for me. It was quite beneficial. Bitstream was a lot of fun. It was a bit of the frontier of digital type. So Bitstream's claim to fame was that it was the only independent digital type foundry in which the company wasn't attached to any particular hardware. So Linotype was a company in which they created type and it was tied to the machines. So Bitstream was able to design type, which wasn't attached to any hardware. So our products could be used for multiple platforms. I was able to make it a pretty successful company. And as a company, we initially, when I came in '83, we were kind of re-digitizing existing types to build a library. So we wanted to get our first 50 typefaces out, and they were typical, Times of Helvetica, all the popular faces at the time. We wanted to make sure that our core group of fonts in our library was going to be popular and bought and used by folks. So my job really was to take analog art. Mostly it was art from Linotype. These were rubylith films of letters that were pretty large, 5 or 6 inches tall, and we would digitize them. We had these massive computers provided by an Israeli company called Camex. We had this beautiful space in Cambridge, in an old loft building, that cavernous space, and these machines were really large. They were as big as a large desk. And they hummed, they were really loud. And we had floppy disks that we used. So it seemed like ancient technology. But we thought we were the coolest people on the planet at the height of technology, which was funny because the technology changed so rapidly at that point. I started to work for Bitstream in '83 and '85, the Mac was introduced. And we had David Berlow was working at Bitstream at the time. It's a colleague of mine, and he got the first Mac not long after the hardware was released. A company called Alsys created a fontographer, so it's a type design software. It's pretty basic stuff, but at the time it was a beautiful program and made designing type seem accessible to everyone. So he started to play around with that, and he showed me how it worked. And I wasn't that interested at the time because I was pretty much working at Bitstream. I liked my affiliation with them. I was learning a lot about type and just redesigning existing typefaces for digital media. But he kept going with it, and I think he left Bitstream in '89. I think he got frustrated with the company, and he had some visionary ideas about what the Mac could do in the way of designing type and allowing companies and customers to look for more custom solutions to the existing typefaces that were available. So he created Font Bureau with Roger Black in '89. And though I wasn't quite ready to join that ship, he was able to establish a pretty interesting young company, which I eventually did start to work for when I left Bitstream in '91. But at Bitstream, I was able to eventually design 2 original typefaces, which was great. I did want to do more of that original work, but by the time I got around to doing that in '89 and '90, the company was not doing that well. There was a lot of competition. Adobe kind of had a corner on the market as far as designing original typefaces, and their software is so popular, people would tend to gravitate toward Adobe's apps, so they would gravitate toward Adobe's type. And we were putting out products that weren't particularly popular. So Bitstream was starting to break apart, fall apart financially, and I left in '91. And I I called David and I said, what can I do for you? And he said, you can design whatever you want. Design original designs, and we'll give you some seed money, and we'll see if we can sell them. So it was a nice way to land. I had some experience at Bitstream. I really enjoyed collaborating with Matthew Carter, working on my original faces with his feedback. And having Mike Parker around was pretty beneficial for anybody who was interested in the world of type. I met some great people there, and I had a great experience. It lasted 8 years, but now I was at Font Bureau, and that was a whole nother phase for me. It's a good question. I think I tend to be pretty eclectic in my tastes and in my talent, and I'll do something somewhat conservatively based on some calligraphic notion I've had or something I've seen, and expand on it. But then, after I finish that, I'll say, well, now I want to do something totally different. So I try to keep myself interested in different forms of type, and I get inspired by many different things. So I think my work reflects my eclectic interests and tastes. I think every visual artist needs and probably is very curious about what they see. And it helps not to be narrow in your interests. I think for me, I tend to look at everything. I look at buildings and architecture and cars, so industrial design and landscape design. I tend to walk down the street and my brain's on fire. I just try to see everything. I try to pick out details, things that interest me, a flower bed against a stone wall, or the color of a car against the color of the house, the patterns and textures in a building, whether it's stone or clapboard. So both in detail and larger pictures, I try to see textures and patterns and movement wherever I am and whatever I'm doing. I love to look at fashion and people, and I love to look at the sky and the clouds. I just cannot turn my eyes and brain off. So all that comes back to the way I approach type and lettering. So how can you not be eclectic? I think the most successful type designers keep themselves interested. And though they may not have as eclectic a library as I do, this is just how I need to work. So I'll work on a fairly conservative family. I'll follow it with something completely different. So Shimano and Bremen are very different faces. And as I'm looking through books and some visual source material, I'll see a page of lettering, hand lettering from some artist. It could be at any time in history. And I'll see a few letters even that inspire me to kind of give me the seed of an idea for something that I'll try to work out. And I'm endlessly fascinated by my own process. And I think that helps me to keep going. So all of a sudden this display type will just pop into my head, and I'll start sketching out some letters, and I'll have to just carry it through A to Z and see what it looks like. I might put it away for 20 years, but I also might try to publish it. A lot of years of transitions. I think initially for Font Bureau, I was able to finally work on my own original stuff, which I wasn't that free to do at Bitstream. At Font Bureau, with that freedom, I did two things. So I worked on my original designs, and I was also given work by David to help out with custom work. So early on at Font Bureau, a lot of the work that he and Roger were doing were for clients of Roger's. So he was, as you well know, a national designer for magazines and newspapers. And early on in this industry, the custom work that was being offered to these companies engendered a lot of new work, both for headlines and text faces. And some of that work rippled down to me. So that was some of what I did early on at Font Bureau. So basically, I was a kind of consultant freelancer for them. And it was a nice combination of work for me. I was still learning a lot, but having the freedom to pursue my own original type design ideas. And I did that for quite a few years. So I'd say from 91, pretty much all the way to 2007, I was a consultant freelancer for Font Bureau. And I should add, all this time I was still doing some freelance calligraphy. When I could, I was still getting commissions to do calligraphic work. Not a ton, but I kept it going. It was a nice way to make a little bit of money on the side as well and keep my hand in it. In 2007, Font Bureau finally offered me a job. I thought, how nice, I can get some health insurance and a salary. It seemed about good timing for where I was in my life. So from 2007 till Type Network was founded, I worked as a full-time senior type designer for Font Bureau, doing pretty much the same thing I had been doing previous to being hired full-time. I was still working on my own stuff. Font Bureau had come a long way since then, established a very influential type library. It was very well respected in the industry, and we had great people working for us. It was a great group of people, many of which are still there, mostly incorporated into Type Network, have their own studios within Type Network. And I think all these transitions in companies and people I worked with seemed just a natural progression for me. I did. After college, I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do. I was still very much involved with photography at the same time I was continuing my lettering studies. And I thought, maybe I'll go to RISD and see if I can get admitted to the graduate photography program. And I loved photography. I was really involved in it. It was all analog at the time. There were no digital cameras yet. And I went and I interviewed, and despite whoever interviewed me was very encouraging, but also very realistic about my chances of getting in. Basically said, you have some good stuff here, but it's not good enough. So I said, okay. And I left. I wasn't really that disappointed. Certainly didn't know how I was going to pay for it if I got admitted. So it was one of those things where, I think it was fate or destiny that wasn't my path. And I just continued my lettering journey, and it turned out for the best. Yeah, so let's see, I've been teaching there for 7 years. 7 years ago, I moved from Boston to a small town in Rhode Island called Bristol. And my colleague Cyrus at Font Bureau, Cyrus Highsmith, was teaching type design at RISD. He had decided to stop teaching at the undergraduate level and just teach at the graduate level at RISD. And he asked me if I'd be interested in taking over his position. I said, interesting, sure. Why don't I try that, maybe give back a little bit. So there I was all of a sudden on the faculty at RISD teaching type design. I was pretty thrilled and nervous because I never taught. I mean, I taught workshops in calligraphy over the years, but no semester-long classes with curriculums and rooms full of students you have to look at every week and keep entertained, interested. But it turned out to be the perfect match for me. It's perfect forum for me to share what I know with students. And after 7 years, I can say I still enjoy it. And I really feel like students are appreciating what I have to offer. Well, I think my starting place at RISD was the same that I had for myself. And I came to type through calligraphy, and I felt the benefit of that. And I felt that is something that I wanted to share with my students. So it seemed important for me to show them a process that helped me. And that process was to approach type through the use of calligraphic tools, since historically that's how it all happened. So to give a calligraphy workshop within the type class, at first, I thought was the best way to approach it. And I think students benefit from that by just learning to use a broad edge tool, even if just for 5 hours, the initial class, to give them a sense of how our letter forms were initially constructed. And I think I still do it to this day. When I do get to teach the calligraphy workshops, when the curriculum allows, I really suggest to my type students that they take that workshop before they take type. And some of them do, and it shows in the quality of their work. So before we even touch the computer in class, we do a lot of hand exercises and drawing. I don't know if other type design teachers approach it that way. I'm sure some do. I know Cyrus does. But I feel that my students benefit from that process, using analog drawing tools before they ever touch a computer. Yeah, that's just my way. I mean, I try to customize it for the class itself. It's odd how each class has its own particular energy. My curriculum was kind of handed to me in a way from Cyrus. So one of the things that he offered, and I still do, is paper cutout exercise called 36 E's. And I have students set up 4x4 squares of black construction paper, and they make the letters E's by cutting out the white parts. Just thinking about how counter space and negative space is just as important, if not more important, than actually making a black mark to make the letter. So there's lots of ways to approach type and see type and teach type. I like to get my students to think about a paragraph of type. It's very easy to see each letter as a kind of an architectural structure and try and make it beautiful. But I think it's really important that letters are used in lines and paragraphs of type, and it's imperative that they see the larger view and take that into consideration when they're drawing. I think it's important for them to focus on a type design that can teach them, because it's a single elective. They get one shot at it for the most part, and I only get one shot at them. The project I choose to teach is for them to design a text typeface. It's kind of the hardest thing to visualize and draw. It's got the most strict specifications and parameters because it's got to be used small sizes. And when you tend to design letters and draw them by hand or digitize them several inches tall. But when you proof a text typeface, you're looking at the 8, 9, 10 point, and everything changes in that scale. So it's kind of the hardest thing for them to draw. And I figured if they can accomplish that in a way that they can learn the most about type design by doing the hardest thing, I think, at first. And once they've got that skill, the process and the methodology, and the ability to proof text forms, they can draw anything they want after that. They can go wild and design display faces and really ornamental stuff. And that's fun to see, that creativity come out. Yes, that has happened, and it's a wonderful thing to find out. I do stay in touch with some of my students, at least follow their Instagram accounts, and sometimes they'll ask me for a recommendation to get into a particular program or to get a scholarship, and I'm always willing to help out. But I do see that quite a few of them have pursued type design. There's no better compliment to a teacher than for a student to tell them that you were seminal in choices they made, and inspiring them to pursue something that continually inspires me. I encourage them to just keep their eyes and their minds open and allow things to happen that they may not expect, and not to be so focused on a particular kind of work. I think it's really important to just be willing to go with the flow and see what's offered, and also take some chances and risks and maybe try something that's unexpected that's being offered or in front of their face, and not to turn it down just because it's not what they hoped would happen.